What's up, fellas? So I wanted to make a video about the glutes and show you the importance of the glutes before y'all go out there and get all brolic. I know y'all watching my videos and y'all in the gym and y'all getting all brolic. I wanted to bring y'all and let y'all calm y'all hot ass down for a second while I school y'all on some of the importance to keep you from hurting yourself, all right? Because at the end of the day, guys, this shit is about health. All right, so aesthetics is good. Everybody wants to look good and everybody wants to be jacked, and that's all good and dandy. But, you know, I don't know if a lot of you guys seen what's going on over there with my boy Chris Jones over there at Pump Chasers. He's suffering from a back issue with his disc. And so you can go and get jacked all you want, guys. An injury like that, he's going to lose a lot of size behind that. So I don't want you guys to go and get all jacked and this, that, and the other. All it takes is one little injury, or what the Hodge twins call it, Snap City, and all your gains could come to a screeching halt. Guys, I got a lot of injuries I'm dealing with my shoulder, my back, my knee, all type of shit from lifting heavy. And I'm gonna sit here and tell you right now, if I could rewind the clock, the hands of time, 15 years, I'll go back, man. I'll fucking lighten that fucking weight up and do way more reps than that fucking hero lifting bullshit, all right? That fucking competition weightlifting bullshit, you know, now as you get older, you get wild and you like, man, to wake up with no aches and pains and shit like that from all that crazy ass lifting, man, it ain't worth it. I'm telling you like that right now, guys. So let me teach y'all some shit, because at the end of the day, man, this shit supposed to be for health. Yeah, attracting bitches and shit, that's good. But you can't attract bitches if you're in a fucking wheelchair or you're fucking in pain all the fucking time. See what I'm saying? So before aesthetics, we got to put health, all right? And one of the most important things as with health and fitness is the glutes. And nope, I ain't talking about so you can have buns of steel and attract women and shit like that. I'm talking about guys, the glutes have an important role in your health, all right? And so one of the first things you need to know right off the bat, that if you got weak glutes, so let's say this is the back of your pelvis, this is the front of your pelvis. If your glutes are weak, your pelvis is gonna do like that. That's an anterior pelvic tilt, guys. All right, so let's say your pelvic is sitting like this, and this the back of it, this is where your glutes at, and this is the front of it, the pubic part, where your fucking dick at. You're gonna get an anterior pelvic tilt if your glutes are weak, all right? That's what's gonna happen. Well, what's wrong with that? Look, if my pelvis is like this, and this is the front of my pelvis, and this is from a side view, guys, not the front, this is from the side view. Look at my lumbar disc. Look at my lumbar curve, my lordotic curve. You see that? What's gonna happen if it goes more? You're gonna get more of a lordotic curve, all right? Do that sound good for your disc? What's gonna happen if you get more of a lordotic curve in your fucking spine? The back of the disc, they're gonna become more pressed. See, you want your spine is made to where the disc is supposed to take an even load, all right? But if you get more of a lordotic curve in your lumbar, the back of the disc are getting more compressed. Now, is you gonna have a herniated disc in 2 weeks? No. All this shit takes time, guys. If you go there and you look at my boy Chris Jones, he did not get no fucking disc bulge from 2 weeks of lifting. That shit takes years, all right? It took him all his life to build that up, all right? So if you fucking 18 years old, you probably ain't got to worry about this today. But if you check back with me in 15 or 20 years, and I guarantee you, if you don't start working on it, you're going to probably have some fucking disc issue, all right, if you lifting heavy, all right? That's the bottom fucking line. So, yeah, you'll get away with it right now, but then by the time you get my age, you'll be walking around here with herniated disc and bulging disc and all that bullshit. So, guys, that's the number one thing you need to know with the glutes is it keeps your lordotic curve in the right. You're supposed to have like this much of a curve in your lumbar, but the more of an anterior pelvic tip, the bigger that curve is. The bigger that curve is, the more pressure that comes on the back of the disc, the back part of the disc, all right? Over time, you're gonna get a bulge or you're gonna get a herniation, all right? Something like that. You're gonna get something like that, all right? Next thing you need to know, guys, is if you got that anterior pelvic tilt, what happens is your glutes now are shut off, all right? So that means that your hip flexors are overactive, which means they're too fucking tight, which means that now your glutes are not gonna fire. So this is, let's take this like this. So I got this towel. So let's say this is the glutes and the front is the hip flexor. All right, so this is the hip flexor. I'm a tight hip flexor. This is the glute. The glute is trying to fire. It can't. The hip flexors are too fucking tight. All right, if you want this glute to fire properly, you got to release this hip flexor. All right, if this hip flexor is too fucking tight, when the glute go to try to fire, it can't, because this hip flexor is too tight. So it can't fire properly. All right, so what ends up happening if the glute is not firing properly? Your hip does not externally rotate. All right, the glutes are also for external rotation of the hip, guys. All right, so if my glutes are not firing properly, when I walk down the street, they can't keep my fucking femur externally rotated. All right, so which means that my hip internally rotates in, which means that what? All the weight is shifting on the inside of my knee. All right, so you might have some knee pain on the inside. You might get shin splints, and you're gonna lose the arch in your foot. Your foot is gonna pronate or evert. All right, so your glutes got to fire to keep your hip externally rotated without you thinking about it. All right, when you walking down the street or you jogging, your glute is supposed to naturally keep your hip externally rotated. All right, so if it's not firing, you internally rotating. So if you see a lot of joggers, they have foot issues, or they have shin splints, or they have inside knee pain, medial knee pain. That comes from their glute not firing properly, keeping their hip externally rotated, which means all their weight shifts on the inside of their leg. All right, so if you want to get rid of those pains, your foot pain, like you losing your arch, your foot pronates, or you got shin splints, or you got knee pain, you got to get your glutes to firing properly, which means that you got to release the hip flexors. All right. Next thing that come into play is you got your hamstrings and you got your lower back, which assist in hip extension. All right, so hip extension, guys, is when you bring your leg back. All right, that's hip extension. All right, so if my glutes are not firing properly because they're shut off, because my hip flexors have shut off my glutes. Now, before I explain the hip flexors, why would my body shut my glutes off because my hip flexors are too tight? Well, guys, anytime you got a tight agonist, the antagonist is gonna shut off. Your brain does that to protect itself. All right, your brain don't want to fire two muscles at the same time. Don't want to fire the agonist and the antagonist at the same time. All right, your brain works when one fires, it shuts the other one off. All right, when you have a tight hip flexor, your brain doesn't know that muscle is not working, but it senses the tension. The tightness is sending a signal to your brain to shut the glute off. All right, so your brain got a signal that your glute is firing. Even though you're not using it, the tightness, how tight it is sending a signal to your brain to shut your fucking glutes off. All right, because imagine if this is tight and I fire my glutes, what's gonna happen? Something's gonna tear. Something's bad gonna happen. All right, to keep that from happening, my brain shuts my glute off, since the hip flexor is sending a signal to my brain that it's firing right now. All right, so your brain can't fire the agonist and the antagonist at the same fucking time. It got to inhibit one of them. All right, and since the hip flexor is tight, it's gonna inhibit the fucking glute. All right. So what happens when my glute is inhibited, my hamstring and my lower back does more extension than they supposed to. All right, your glute supposed to be the prime hip extender. All right, but since it's inhibited or slightly inhibited, because guys, understand this, don't think of your glutes and your hip flexor as on and off switch. Think of it more as a dimmer switch. All right, so let's say your hip flexor is 80% tight. Well, maybe your glute is firing 20%. Let's say your hip flexor is 50% tight. Then maybe your glute is firing 50%. See, it ain't no on or off. Is how much tight the hip flexor is. If it's super tight, the glute won't fire at all. If it's a little tight, the glute will fire decent, but it won't fire properly. All right, so if you want your glutes working optimally, you got to release and stretch your hip flexor. All right, the more released it is, the less tension on it, the more proper your glutes gonna fire. All right, if it's super tight, your glutes gonna get very little effort. All right, that's the way it works, guys. All right, so your hamstring and your lower back got to compensate, since your glutes ain't doing what they supposed to do. All right, this is why a lot of people get hamstring cramps and all this and that, or they lower back later on in the day, they go, damn, my back. The reason your back is tired like this is because it's tired of carrying the weight for your fucking glutes. All right, your glutes ain't doing a fucking job. So your back got to do more, your hamstrings got to do more. Over time, your hamstring starts to cramping and shit because the hamstrings are an assistant muscle to the glute, not a fucking prime mover. All right, so if you want to fix that, guys, you got to release the hip flexor and you got to release the groin, which is the adductors. All right, because the adductors, they're not a primary hip flexor, but they assist in hip flexion. All right, so you got to release those two and understand that if my hip can't stay externally rotated, what happens? Well, that means that my groin is also now internally rotating, internally pulling it in. All right, so which means they're gonna get tight. So since my hip is not externally rotating, now my groin is gonna become overactive too, because now my hip is internally rotating in, which is gonna tighten up my hip flexors, shorten my hip flexors. All right, when I say shorten, I mean tighten. That's what muscles do, they shorten. All right, so I gotta release those and I gotta release my hip flexor to get my glutes firing properly. All right, so you gotta foam roll your hip flexor and you gotta foam roll your groin, which is your adductors. All right, and then you gotta do your stretches. You gotta do your hip flexor stretch, which is on one knee, and the groin stretch, guys, can be just like a little side lunge with no weights, just a side lunge stretch. And the hip flexor could be like the one knee stretch, like you finna propose to a girl when you're on one fucking knee, where you finna propose, that's a hip flexor stretch. And next thing you gotta do is you got to work your fucking glutes in isolation, all right, which we call activate, all right? So what you wanna do is you want to inhibit all the assisting muscles. So a good glute activator, guys, is when you land on your back. If you land on your back and you got both feet on the ground and you do a glute bridge with a glute band around your knees, all right? So the glute band around your knees is isolating the glute knees out from the glute extension, all right? So, and hold your belly button in, all right? So hold your belly button in and do glute bridges. That's gonna work your glutes in isolation. The next thing you need to do is you need to integrate them back in, all right? To integrate them back in, you can do any little reverse lunge, curl to press, all right? Basically what you wanna do is a full body glute movement, all right? Which can be something as simple as reverse lunge up to one single leg standing curl to press, all right, just to integrate it back in. What you're trying to do is retrain the molding pattern for your glutes to work with your whole body as a unit, all right? Because when they get inhibited like that, basically what happens is your glutes have forgotten how to work, all right? You ever seen a guy like somebody who had like a stroke or something like that, where they got to learn how to walk again? That's essentially what you got to do with your glutes. You got to retrain them to start firing properly again, all right? So guys, I want you guys really working on doing this glutes, because it's very important. If you don't do it when you get around my age, not 60, when you get around, if you 22 right now and you going into the gym and you all hooked up and got, you know, the Ultimate Warrior paint on your face and you in there lifting and thinking you King Kong and all this bullshit, I guarantee you when you get around 35 to 40 years old, your body gonna start breaking down on you, all right? So one of the things that can help you is strong glutes. It's gonna protect your back, it's gonna protect your knees, it's gonna protect your foot. Guys, you don't wanna get no plantar fasciitis, all right? I done trained clients who done had plantar fasciitis, which means that they basically can't keep an arch in their foot and the fascia keeps stretching out and the shit hurts, all right? And so you see a lot of people, what they do is they go get fucking soles put in their foot to keep their arch up, all right? You don't want to get to that fucking point, all right? And so I encourage y'all guys to make sure your glutes are firing properly. I know I see a lot of you guys, you'll have guys who can deadlift 700 pounds, but their glutes don't work properly, all right? So make sure you guys, and the reason being, guys, the reason that is because they can deadlift 700 pounds is because they done built up their hamstrings and their lower back so fucking strong to compensate for their glute, all right? That's why even though their glutes don't work properly, their lower back and their hamstrings have developed so strong, it can compensate for weak glutes, all right? So I want you guys working on your glutes, learning how to get them to fire properly. Don't nothing come before releasing and stretching, all right? You can strengthen and do all the shit you want to, but if you don't release the hip flexor and release the groin, won't much change, guys, all right? You got to release the hip flexor. Without the hip flexor sending a signal to your brain that they've been released, your glutes will never fire properly. Your brain is never gonna fire your glutes properly as long as it got that tension from the glutes, all right? This is the glutes. This is the hip flexor, this is your glutes. If this is the glute and it's super tight, when this glute go to fire, it won't fire. Your brain will shut it off. It won't let it fire. But if this glute ain't as tight, when your glute go to fire, it'll fire because the glute, the hip flexors is not too tight. All right, guys. So I hope I explained that pretty good. Like the video. I try not to make it too long. Like the video. Comment down below what y'all want to see next. I want you guys taking these fucking correctors very seriously. All right, y'all going to get all hooked up. I don't want to get y'all hurt. Remember, this shit is health first, bitches second. I know everybody want to look aesthetic and be all jacked and shit, but you also want to be healthy and pain-free, guys. Always remember that. Like the video. Comment down below what y'all want to see next. Holla back.